Welcome to Leaning In, a space for curious conversation and active engagement. I, Tanya Mikvitz,
and I, Jessica Lusty, invite you to lean into life together, exploring what it means to live into transformational practices in our day-to-day lives as we engage in relationships, family dynamics, our conditioning, and the narratives of dominant culture.
How do we actually embody change in our own lives and as a collective?
In this special episode of Leaning In, we journey with founder of Connected Business, Force for Meaningful Change, and trainer of leaders for a new paradigm, Mounira Latrache, who shares with us her own experience of conforming to the unwritten rules of the business world, of awakening to who she was becoming in that process, and what responding to her realizations revealed to her about how our inner experience is deeply implicated in our capacity to show up differently, to address the external systems and structures we know need to change. We dive deep with Mounira into how to recognize the mechanisms, the inner mechanisms that kick in when we're activated within professional environments in order to become leaders capable of supporting the psychological safety, vulnerability, and authenticity required for change. How to build our capacity to be with discomfort in ways that enables true compassion and organic insight. The important difference between shifting mindset and embodying new mindsets, and what is involved in moving from fear-based approaches to trust-based approaches and beyond. We're really excited for you to share in this exploration as Mounira shares with us what she's learned about the nature of transformation and guides us in relationship with the archetypal death process involved in change.
So, we are so excited, Jessica and I, for this final episode in our first season of Leaning In. We're especially excited because we're bringing with us a guest and a sister, fellow sister on the shadow working path, Mounira Latrache, who we have spent a lot of time with in deep work with. And Mounira is a wisdom keeper, in my opinion, and somebody who is so incredibly committed to showing up in her own work and in her work in the world. I'm really excited for the conversations that we'll have today, and glad that you are here and tuning in and listening to the wisdom that will no doubt unfold. So Mounira and Jessica and I have sat in women's circles, shadow working circles with our guide and mentor, Robert Masters, several times. And we've also gone through a year and a half's long shadow work apprenticeship together. And as we're bringing to you Leaning In, really as with the idea of it being a platform and for community and for fellow practitioners, how we hope to weave forwards is to open up the space to more voices, more experiences. And to begin with, we couldn't really think of anyone more precious to do this with than Mounira, to really go deeper into what this work can do, not just for ourselves, but also in the world. So Mounira is incredibly committed to her personal work. And I know this as we've sat side by side and witnessed such depth and courage and vulnerability in her work. And what I didn't really know until as we've got to know each other sort of outside of that a little bit more is that Mounira came through the business world and then created and has been a director of her own business, Connected Business, for several, I think about 8 years, nearly a decade, and is really bridging inner work with the work within organization structures and businesses. And this is so much of what we want to be in conversation around here with Leaning In as well, is that we're doing this inner work, not just as sort of navel gazing and for ourselves, but it really is to be in a greater and more responsible and more connected relationship and reciprocity with the world at large and with each other and with all beings. So really heartfelt welcome to you, Mounira. Thank you so much for taking the time to joining us and for sharing with us and everyone who listens more about your journey. Jessica, is there anything that you would like to add to what I've just shared?
Just my absolute excitement to share in this conversation, because when I listen to Mounira talk about the journey that she's had in the business world and working within organizations, and how the trajectory that her engagement is taking at this point based on what she's learned through that journey, I just feel such a sense of grounded optimism about the possibilities of realizing the kinds of transformations that we really need to systemically and structurally and organizationally to come into a way of being in relationship with one another and the world that really centers care, and that prioritizes values that are beyond efficiency and profit, and what are, what I graduated from school just feeling so concerned and kind of bewildered about, the sort of the absolute dominance of that narrative of efficiency and profit, economies of scale, and all the kinds of things that I learned were really sort of running the show, so to speak, in terms of how we're relating to one another and the earth, in terms of how businesses run. And it's such an essential aspect of the transformation that we need to make. And so I think the way Mounira is engaging this is so exciting and hopeful. And so I'm really, really grateful to have you here, Mounira. And I would love to invite you to start with anything you want to share. But I'd love to pose this question if it's a good jumping off point for you. But you can obviously start with whatever is in your mind and heart right now. But I'm curious if you could share with us and the listeners where your journey took you. Like, what were the moments and the turning points where you really began to see the bridge and the connection between kind of inner personal transformational healing work and what you were trying to do in terms of helping businesses transform their models, towards, better relationships within the business and the kinds of things that you were centering in Connected Business, your organization.
Yeah, sure. Hello, first of all, nice to be here with you in this space. And I think one of the big learning from our journeys together is how important it is to go into those deep spaces and just really look into those places that are so hidden from ourselves. And yeah, to your question, this is actually what got me there, right? It was more or less, it started just with a personal journey. I was in business, I was in this business world, and I was struggling in it, feeling like all these power structures, the hierarchy, this like, this success over everything, this sometimes, kind of like forgetting that we are all human. I really struggled with it. And but I came into this cosmos of, kind of like a mutual, this is just how it is, right? This is how the world works. This is how business works. If you want to be successful and survive and have the money for your rent and all of that, you got to play this game, right? So I felt like I was in this world with all these unwritten rules, and I just had to comply with them. And I remember that I did that, and actually I was really good at it, I have to say. And after, I think, 1.5 years or so being in it, playing the game, so to say, I really looked into the mirror and looking at myself and was shocked. And because what I saw when I looked into the mirror was like, I lost myself. I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't like myself. If I'm really honest, I'm kind of like an asshole these days, and it really shook me. It was a very honest look into the mirror, but it was powerful because I retracted, how did I even get there? And I understood all those unwritten rules, like they just changed the way I behaved and also the environment that I was in. So my question in that moment was, okay, so who do I actually want to be in all of this? What kind of values do I want to live? And is it possible to do that in an environment where those values are not lived? And that was a question that started for me, almost 20 years ago. It's been a while. And then I started staying in the business world, but I started trying to figure out, can I do it differently? And obviously that started with myself, like such a deep journey with myself. And I found a lot of tools of inner transformation, of real personal development that I didn't find within the business world. I found them outside of it. So I went on the journey of really going into mindfulness, into yoga. I've done multiple yoga teacher trainings and that were really deep. I started with Ashtanga, and then I went to forest yoga, and forest yoga is kind of like very trauma based. And there I understood trauma on a different level, on a physical level, and understood how much whatever I've experienced in early childhood was actually affecting how my body felt, all these parts of my body that were numbed out because of that, or so much that I've learned from this deep yoga and mindfulness journey. And kind of and then I was like, why does no one speak about this in business? I mean, everything I've learned is so powerful. And then I noticed, not only that I felt better and more connected to myself, and I felt like I got a way back to my values, but I could see how it changed everything, how I worked with people, how I communicated, what I did with stress. I could see how I could make those step backs, really literally step back and seeing a situation from a totally different angle. And when I started this journey, I thought all of these things in business need to change. And I pointed the finger on all the things that I wanted to see change. But after going through this journey myself over these years, I understood, wow, wait a second, nothing has changed, right? My outer circumstances are still the same. I'm still in this culture and still in this environment, but things have changed tremendously because I've changed. And I think that was such a powerful aha moment for me, because I noticed the first thing that needs to change is me, and I have to transform myself. So that, I saw the power in a change, or how Gandhi is saying, you need to change, you wish to see. And it was really powerful for me to see that, because first it was all outside. It was outside of me, nothing to do with me, because I knew all the answers, how to do it differently. But I could really see how much my own leadership, for example, I became a leader, I was leading teams. And so how do I lead in a compassionate way? How do I lead in a way that creates trust? Be a mindful leader, communicate in a different way. And again, although I've done so much work already, I could see my own mechanisms kicking in. For example, I'm like, control is one of my shadows and one of my mechanisms. And so as I was, being a leader for other people, and then someone came with their problem, and all I could do is see, like control the situation in giving suggestions right away, or tell the person you need to do this and this and this. And through this inner work, I could, see those mechanisms all of a sudden. And I saw, wow, okay, I'm really controlling right now. And then, of course, dropping deeper into myself and noticing, what is it that gave the impulse for me to control right now? And so I went deep and I saw, okay, I feel unsafe. And that's the core of me controlling the other person. It doesn't even have to do anything with the situation or the other person, but it's like quite a deep thing to admit, oh, right now I'm feeling unsafe, and all I want to do is control everything in the outside, including the people who are in my team and who I'm supposed to lead. So that was the first step. And then to see, okay, first I need to even be aware that this mechanism is playing out right now. And then I need to have this capacity to step back. And so, for example, mindfulness was one of the most powerful tools for me to make these inner step backs. And then the question, who am I as a person? Who do I want to be as a leader? What are my values? What's my own purpose, my own contribution in this life? So it was also a deep journey of understanding who I actually want to be and who I am. And connected with that, in that moment, I could say, okay, if I want to be the leader that I want to be, how would I react differently? And then very often it was just, instead of giving like lots of good advice, and I always thought I have so much good advice, but I also could see advice is very often not what people want to hear when they are in a difficult situation. It's sometimes the last thing we want to hear, right? So, for example, in that moment, I would just listen and hear that person out and just mindfully listen. And then after half an hour, one of the persons that I did that with just went out of the room and said, "Thank you, you helped me so much." And I thought, wow, I literally didn't do anything. How did that person think I helped them? And it was just creating a safe space where the person could speak it all out. And then, she felt okay to find her own solutions. And there I could see for the first time, oh, wow, that's when you empower someone. Because not only was it about listening, right? Energetically, I gave that person kind of like the message, I trust in your own capacity to find the solution, and if not, I'm here, right? But before that, I gave this message, I don't trust you. I don't even trust myself. Everything is unsafe and I've got to control the situation. Otherwise, it's not gonna, So it was very fear-based also, right? Like out of this fear, that was my reaction. So all this deeper work showed me how deep it can go and how much it changes everything. And so to come back to your question, that's why I noticed, okay, if we really want to change an organization and an organizational structure, it has to start with ourselves. We, on an individual base, have to transform fundamentally so we can live and create a different team culture, a different organizational culture that is aware and mindful and understands the subtleties of mechanics that happen within two people, within a group, within a team, within, in the end, a society, which is, one of the aha moments I had. It's basically, it doesn't matter if it's a business, an organization, or if it's us as society, it's the same mechanics. So that brought me to that journey to understand before we can actually change the collective, we have to dive deep into our own journey first. I don't know if that answered actually your question, Polly. I'm just pausing here in case any one of you wants to chime in here.
I think you just touched on something that is so profound. I just sort of feel like I want to return to it. It's profound and it's deep and it's so at the core of how we behave with each other, and how we're taught to behave with each other on the whole, which is the doing bit, right? It's that when somebody is in any kind of distress or has a problem, the way that we also feel that we're somehow can be important is if we do something about it. And, you know, like you would just explain it. And I have some awareness of this, but I was like, oh gosh, in the last few days, I've been quite overwhelmed with many things, and I'm sort of a little bit thin. My skin's a little bit thin. And I notice I go exactly into those patterns, you know, because it is a sense of control. And I think, and that you know, that inside of, you know, the need to control comes from, often it can be many things, but that thing of like trying to find some ground, right? Trying to find some safety when you're not feeling safe. If I can hold on, you know, so, you know, the flip side of anxiety, which many of us, for many reasons, you know, deal with on a regular basis, can become that sort of controlling behavior very easily. But also the paradigm of how we live, you know, that it is that we validate ourselves and feel valued on the basis of what we do, as opposed to who we are. And often when we're just are with people, that is the most profound healing. So thank you for bringing that into the larger context and conversation as well.
Right. And exactly what you say is very interesting, because right now in business, I see a lot of people understanding there needs to be a shift, right? And so a lot of people talk about mindset shift. We need to shift mindsets. And that is a very interesting thing, because for me, mindset is not what needs to shift, because that's literally, you know, on the area of the mind. It's only changing the thinking, but it's not the embodiment. And so I talk a lot within the business world of, hey, yes, of course, mindset needs to shift. But what's more important is that you actually embody those new ways, right? Because a lot of people can talk about the new, but it's different when it's really embodied, because then it shows in your actions and in your words and your whole behavior, in the whole person who you are. And you can't fake that, right? If I understand the mindset need to shift, it's just one stage of it. So the embodiment part is when I can say, oh, I don't need to do, I can just be, right? We all know these kind of like people when they enter the room, kind of like, you know, monks who have done like deep inner work, they just need to enter the room and there's calmness in the room. They don't say anything, they don't do it, you know, okay, they have an embodied stillness and an embodied presence. It's not coming from their mindset shifted, then they know, oh, meditation is good or mindfulness is good. It's because they've practiced it so much that their presence has shifted. And so this is also, you know, I think that was one of the challenges doing this work in the business world, because in order to go from mindset to embodiment, you need to take time and space. This is not a quick fix. It's not like a 3-step to or a 90-minute talk and then you know everything about it and you can live it. But it's so much deeper, and to you know, but without having that experience of, wow, embodiment is the bigger shift, we don't really believe in it, right? Then we're like, yeah, come on, just tell me the 10 steps too, and I'm gonna figure it out, right? And it's exactly the opposite of it. Is you need to have those experiences and you need to really dive deep into it for it to be integrated as an embodied wisdom or knowledge inside of you. And so, yeah, like, and also you need to have this embodiment to understand how much those hierarchical structures are actually part of ourselves, right? Like we could say, okay, this hierarchy outside, I hate it, I don't want to have it, right? But then to see how much hierarchy is an embodied thing inside of us, like we have it inside of us. That there needs to be a hierarchy, or some person is better than us, or that competition is important, and all of that, right? So again, the first stage of it was to understand for myself, wow, I'm hierarchical, in like I've internalized this hierarchical thinking in a way that my behavior wants to look good, wants to be good, wants to have those successes, wants to be seen as successful, and all of that. And because as long as I don't see that inside of myself, I'm going to create a culture around me that has this competition. And there's one example that I found really funny. So in a way, so when I, like became a leader, and I understood, okay, I really want to lead differently. I want to be an example for a different way, a psychological safe way, but also a more vulnerable, authentic way. So I decided to redefine leadership in a way, and just, you know, kind of test it out. So I was like talking to my team about everything I'm not good at, all my failures. When I had a bad day, I was just super transparent, like just putting it out to also challenge this idea of leadership needs to be someone who is always in authority and always has it all together and knows all the answers. So I wanted to challenge that old, that picture, because I was sick of being that. It's, it just didn't feel right. So I've done that and played around with it, and I liked it so much. So I decided that's going to be how I'm going to lead. I don't care. And what was very interesting is I forgot about it. But a year later, I employed a new person. And after a week, I asked him, how you feeling? How is it going? And he said to me, you know what, I was so nervous coming in here, and I thought everyone is so much better. And I felt like, really, what am I doing here? Am I good enough for this? And then he said, but you guys all talk so openly about what you're not good at and your bad days and everything. I can just be myself, and I was like, yes, that's amazing. And I felt like, wow, that's the best compliment I could ever receive from, just the leadership, to see people can just be themselves. Because what I didn't notice is that through me doing it, it became our team culture. We all, like, there was so much permission in it. So that was amazing and powerful to see. And then, to close this story, what happened after was, at some point I quit my job, and there was a new person coming in to become the leader. And we had the first team meeting, and we were all sharing what doesn't work well, and all, like, as we have done it in all these years. And after the meeting, she says to me, like, wow, that they were all so negative. And she didn't like it at all. And I was so proud of them, and we were sharing, but she totally didn't like it. And I could see, wow, now I understand why it's so hard to also implement it, because you need to have the capacity to be with not perfection, things that are not running well, to hold that container without going into worry, or I need to control this, and please don't tell me about negative stuff, otherwise I'm not going to be okay with it. And and it was very interesting to see, wow, it's not just having this open, transparent way, but also gaining the capacity to be with discomfort or with challenging times. And again, not to control in those moments, to get back to perfection as fast as possible, but to say, no, this is where we're at right now. And it's fine that it's not perfect. And it's fine that we're struggling and having difficulties, or it's fine that we're failing right now. And we're going to find a way, and so yes, lots of different things. And to go from there to also, like, one of the questions we asked is, okay, once this inner transformation has happened, how can we then translate it into the collective, into the team structure, into organization structures we call it co-leadership way, so that we create a culture where everyone can co-lead with each other. And one of the things that we found early on is there needs the space to verbalize when things are not good. Because a lot of people think, when we talk about mindfulness in business and compassion in business, this is just a nice way of never saying the truth and always being nice to each other, never really calling each other out or saying the uncomfortable truth or going through conflict. But actually it's the opposite. Like, when we have these kind of environments, then we can have safe spaces to say things that are not okay, things that we disagree with. We can maybe even say an opinion that is completely out, like out of the range of the common census opinion, and it's going to be celebrated and invited in, rather than be shut down because it's so different, or because it's maybe also triggering or whatever. So it creates a space where everyone can show up in the way they are, and say whatever it needs to be said. One of the things I noticed, a lot of leaders don't even know where their team is at. because of the culture of don't say anything that is negative. I don't want to hear it. And if you tell me, I'm going to have a judgment about you, rather than saying, hey, wait a second, if everyone tells me everything in a transparent, honest way, that would mean I really have all the information. And yeah, and then consensus way of when everyone knows what's at the table to make a decision that is much more holistic because it's more co-creative. It involves everyone with their values, with their thinking, and it involves the conflict, because the conflict, if it's not spoken, if it's not brought into the circle, it's still there. In an unconscious way, it changes how the team works, how an organization works, how our society works, right? If we pretend certain conflicts are not there, they're still there and they're playing out in an unconscious way if we don't bring them into the center. And this is what I see in the world right now. Lots of conflicts that are escalating. They've been there all along. They haven't just started a week ago or something, or a month ago. They've been there all along. But we just have put them aside or not really looked into the depth of what's the root cause of certain conflicts. And we don't have the capacity for it. That's also the other thing. It's not just that we overlook them, but deeply the capacity to be with certain, let's stretches and discomfort within relationship or within structures. I feel like that's really something we need to learn to move on to the new paradigm, is like, what do we do with conflicts? And I see this even in conscious communities, right? As soon as conflicts come, we don't really have enough of this like capacity of really going through them in a way that it's not like separating or, but that's, I think, that in that stage that we're at right now, that's, I think, our biggest learning now, to see how do we solve conflicts in a way that we can mirror each other, but not judging each other in a way like you're not spiritual enough, or if you do that, you're not a good leader and all of that. But like to see, okay, so the nuance of it is that we're all learning this together right now. And so how can we create spaces where we can also fail? We receive feedback in a loving way, in a conscious way, but also strong feedback. Sometimes we need someone to really call us out. But how do we do that in a way that it doesn't break the whole relationship, but that it just challenges us? And that, again, needs us to have the capacity, enough inner work, enough I'm taking responsibility for my part, so that we can move towards something else and then see some conflicts are actually necessary for growth. And some disruptions are actually exactly what we need to move towards something new. And then in the end, for me, that's why I think death is an important topic towards any kind of transformation, because sometimes we need a death process, and that's a difficult one, a hard one, an ugly one, a fearful one, to bring us to that point of really, starting something new and reinventing something. Because otherwise we create the same old thing. It looks maybe different, but it's the same thing. And it's, in the depth of it, it's the same thing. So to call an example, my business partner, Angel, who really went into co-creation and co-creative systems, that he found is, so let's say in lots of new age communities, it's like we don't have hierarchy. It's like we're all deciding everything together. And what he says is, if you completely get hierarchy completely out of the way and say it doesn't exist, then you create hidden power structures. So hierarchy is still there, power is still there, but it's hidden, and hidden behind the almost like the mask of friendliness, of consensus, but actually it's still there. So power, for example, is always there in group settings. So the question is like, how do we do conscious hierarchy? Like it's still there. Some people need to make the decision. Sometimes a person needs to make a call, but how do we do it in a way that is bringing it into the center and say, of course there is hierarchy, and to transparently talk about, okay, in this specific instance, we need a decision maker. So how do we do this in a, let's say, most co-creative way possible, but at the same time also allowing that certain hierarchies are actually really useful and helpful to move forward. And it also, hierarchy can also sometimes mean, if we redefine it, right, it can be we have a trusted person that we know has all the wisdom and knowledge, and we know that that person will listen to everyone involved and needed, and we trust that person to make the decision in the end. So it's a healthy hierarchy to say, yeah, sometimes one person needs to, be in it. Yeah, I've said a lot. I'm pausing it here right now again.
Thank you so much, Mounira, for everything you're sharing. I really resonate with so much of it. And I'm curious, there's a couple pieces that you brought up, about the capacity, right? And what really are the essential attributes that build capacity for being in the conversation, for being able to speak. Because as you said, you cultivated through your commitment to like an experiential just implementation of a different kind of leadership, so that you could be authentic, you could be transparent, you could be yourself and bring your full self. And then that gave permission for other people to do that. And creating then, a space within which people can be in the vulnerability. And like you said, that sense of unsafety that came up for you when someone else was in a challenge and discomfort. And there was even an unsafety that came up for you in relationship to that. We had our first leaning in intro group in January. And one of the big collective themes in that group was along those lines, like the comfortability of being vulnerable and being able to communicate, speak from the body, speak from the depth of our experience about our own vulnerable places and feelings, and the discomfort in that, and the sense of unsafety that comes up in that. And then on the flip side of that, there were people in the group talking about the vulnerability that comes up for them of being in the space of receiving someone being that honest and being that vulnerable. And how do I be with that where my safety doesn't kick in, my discomfort doesn't kick in, where I then, like you said, that controlling piece of jumping in. Yeah, I'd love for you to, if you want, speak a little bit more about that capacity and how you see it living in the personal space, in the business spaces that you've been in. And then as you talked about in sort of the collective spaces of what it means to be able to both be in that compassionate presencing and listening with one another, and also being able to be in the vulnerability and experience someone else bringing or sharing something that is confrontational, right? And how, what are some of the things that you are finding are applicable in across those settings in terms of supporting that capacity building?
Yeah, thanks so much. It's a powerful question, and I think one that is really dear to me and my own journey, right? And I think so the number one thing I've learned about dealing with the pain of others and being present with the pain of others is I need to encounter my own pain, right? Like one of the most powerful things for me was to really not avoid my own pain, not put it down, not shut it down, but actually to go to all those places where I had pain, deep into early childhood pain moments that I completely shut down back then because they were too painful and too overwhelming to even go there, right? And then so one of the things I've had to learn is to the whole capacity of the kind of pain I could feel to allow myself to feel that and to not, run away from it. And actually, I have to say, Forest Yoga and Anna Forest really helped me with that, because I don't know, for those who don't know her work, but it's kind of like really crazy sometimes. So when I did my teacher training, it's like 4 weeks of people screaming and crying on the yoga mat. Like, it's mental, really, like literally everyone is traumatized in the room. And so when I did my teacher training, 80 people, and there was not one day when people wouldn't scream and cry and everything, right? So my difficulty in the teacher training was I was so overwhelmed by everyone else's pain. I was in this room and I was so overwhelmed by everything that happened for everyone else that, I was switching out of my own body constantly. And just like, it was just too much. And I was with everyone else, right? And so what I learned is to that, keep staying with yourself. And Anna was really good in spotting it. I don't know, she has like this sixth sense. So she spots where you are at your process. And she kept coming to me and look into my eyes and say, stay on your mat, stay with yourself, right? And that was really powerful, because then I started breathing again and being in my body and doing those yoga poses while everyone was screaming and doing all this stuff, but just being with what it causes inside of me when I hear all this suffering, when I feel all of the feelings of other people, what happens inside of me. And then through shadow work, just encountering all those deep, deep, deep spaces inside of me that I've never looked at, because I was just overwhelmed when they happened. And a lot of us, when we do trauma work, we just think, oh, I know what happened, it's fine now, I'm fine now. I thought the same, but then, I've experienced quite, deep trauma as a child. And for years, I didn't even look at it, because I felt I'm fine. But then over time, I noticed, no, I actually unlearned the capacity to be with certain pain, because they invoke my own pain that I don't want to go into. And now today I can see, well, I can be in a room full of people crying and screaming, whatever, and I can still be there. And it's not because I'm, like kind of ascended or something like that. It's just because my capacity for being with any kind of pain has increased through me going into the deepest rabbit holes of my own pain and allowing myself to drop into all of it, not avoiding it. That's the power. And when I first went deeper into understanding what compassion means, like real compassion, it also gave me exactly that aha moment, because I learned compassion is not suffering with others. It's just feeling for others. And in order to, because I learned, if someone I love suffers, I have to suffer the same way. That's what love means. That's what compassion means. But actually, then I learned, no, actually, real compassion means I feel your pain. I am with you in this pain. I relate to your pain, but I'm okay in that moment. And I understood, wow, real compassion is actually, first of all, much harder than, just, saying something to make that person good. But also ultimately understood, when my mother kind of calls me and tells me all of her sorrows, right? And I say, no, mom, it's all going to be fine, da, da, da. In that moment, I understood, I'm not being compassionate right now. Why am I saying all these things to my mom right now? I'm doing it because it causes me pain, and I don't want to feel that pain that I feel from her. So all I'm saying is basically actually really selfish. I say I want to help her, but actually I just want to feel better. And the way I feel better is if I give her all these suggestions, so she's going to feel better. So it's basically not real compassion. It's actually a selfish way of making sure she's fine so I can feel better. But when I go into compassion and I just allow my own pain of, wow, it's really painful for me right now to see my mother suffering, and it breaks my heart, or whatever it does, right? And what could be of service for my mom right now? Because that's my thing. It has nothing to do with her, right? Like, I need to just hold that for myself. But what is of service? And again, very often for me, the answer is I'm just going to listen to her and make her feel heard and seen in her suffering. Not trying to make her feel better, not trying to tell her, look at the bright side or any of that, but just say, hey, I feel you right now. and in all the deep one-to-one shadow work, I'm seeing exactly that is one of the most important things. It's not so much what we do or say, it's creating a safe space for people to drop into whatever wants to show up, like whatever they're at, without like this inner tension of, no, I need that person to be better, otherwise it's not good. But just to say, yeah, let's sit in this for a while and just allow it to be there. And then, that's the biggest medicine actually for all of us. So that's the power for me when it comes to suffering in the world, or in general. I have to go into my own suffering and really feel it, and it always starts with myself. So one of my favorite quotes about leadership is, who you are is how you lead. It's a quote by Brené Brown. And I feel like, yeah, exactly that. Whatever leadership means, right? But it's who you are, is how you do whatever. I mean, so what is my own presence, embodiment? And have I, allowed myself to go to this verge of this death that is scary, that brings up all the pain and all, like, everything big time, and can I go through it to the other side? That's the hardest part of it, I would say.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing on that. And I feel like coming back to that piece around death and, holding sort of this place that we're in collectively and within the business world, that there are these, narratives that actually, need to die in order to birth different narratives and stories about who we are. And it so involves the willingness to be with, it's like, I think about how, one of the common things that comes up when death is, presented in story or in, in a narrative or put forward, is that your life flashes before you. There's this like piece of, that death involves a reconciliation of some kind. This time of year, we're recording this right around the holiday season, and the classic Dickens, Scrooge character, who that is a death narrative, right? Scrooge dies to himself through that experience. And one of the things that is the catalyst for that death of who he was, in order for who he can become more joyful, more generous, and so on, really springs through his confrontation and his real like journey to experience these points in his life where he hardened around his wounds, and he created a narrative of control and protection. So I really, that really is alive for me. And I know Tanya is someone who's always thinking about the stories. You probably have a few. I'm wondering, Mounira, would you be willing to lead one of us in a little bit of guidance around this piece of the death journey?
Sure. Who of you wants to go?
on my last legs seasonally, so I'm open to this.
Okay, great, Tanya. Let's do it then. Okay. Close your eyes and just like take a few deep breaths to just feel centered. How I'm feeling right now is
a little like I'm floating on the surface, and there is a sense of like just staying on the surface, and there is no bottom.
Mm. If I'm having a sense of what's the bottom, what's going all the way down there, what I'm seeing is,
I'm seeing like a big, what I'm not wanting to see, but what I'm seeing is like a big pull under, like a big wave that wants to pull me under.
Mhm. How that wave feels to me is
Like a dissolving, disillusion, but also like it's moving towards something I don't know.
Mhm. How that makes me feel in my body is
Like I'm holding on to not be swept by it.
mm,
There's a lot of like grasping, holding on
mm,
to just staying here.
the part of me that wants to hold on feels
Exhausted,
mm,
like I have no choice but to.
mhm. My exhaustion would have a voice, it would say,
Just give me a break.
mm,
Just let me rest.
yeah.
Just hold me.
Mhm. Just take a moment to just hold that part that really feels like I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I just want to be held. If I could make an assumption, what wants to die in my life right now is
Immediate thing that comes, which I don't want to say. What wants to die is the kind of the structure and the system I've set myself up in.
Mhm. The reason why I don't want to say it out loud is
Because it's all I know.
Mhm. And what I imagine, if all I know would disappear, I would feel
I actually would feel free, which is not what I expected. I'm
something.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just feel like that since since we started this piece of work, just that strong, like the burning down, the ashes, the phoenix, and it's not how I've been feeling, but in this
Mm.
moment going into it, just that sense of like a release and a relief, like the wings,
Mm.
phoenix. Mm.
Yeah. So just allow yourself to let that phoenix energy to be with you and to fill you up and to guide you. Just allow yourself to feel that all over your body. What I'm seeing when I'm connected with this phoenix energy about the wave that feels very strong towards me right now is
A feel like the wave is pulling me into the same place.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm having a real sense of whether I work with it or work against it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the same. So I can be conscious of it and use the energy and ride the energy to lift, or I will be pulled under before I lift.
Mm-hmm. The way I want to go forward with this wave is
I want to get curious about it rather than turn away from
what I could do to become more curious about it is
it. To bring the imagery, which feels very strong right now, continue to bring it into meditative space. See it as work with it as a guide.
Yeah.
Because I feel like something can just come up in terms of like, it's almost like what you said, like the mindset, like this, if I go into a thinking space, I can't see beyond the system and the structure. To a different kind of space, and which is unknown, that might guide me.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to end this little exploration. And before we end it, just take a couple of breaths, really sitting in this unknown for a moment. And almost like inviting it in, feeling like some kind of comfort in this unknown. And now take one more deep breath and just arrive back in this room, in your body, in your presence. Noticing that Jess and I are in this room with you. And then open your eyes again when you're ready.
Thank you. I feel like I just want to say, like, in the most immediate way, how my experience of doing this piece of work just now was exactly what we've sort of been talking about this, or what we keep talking about, really, about how when you turn towards something, the shift can come, right? And it's like when we turn away from something, we continuously perpetuate the old narratives and patterns and structures. And what stands in between is that fear.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanya. And there was actually, as you said, it really beautiful, without intention, because we didn't plan this before. We didn't like talk through this. This was spontaneous. But just like, yeah, seeing this, how big, almost like literally the wave can be. And then as we turn towards the wave and just connect with it, that there's another aspect, all of a sudden we can see the wave from a different angle, right? And so kind of like that's for me also this death process. Very often something needs to die, and very often, like even in a society of, we have so much fear narrative in our society. It's all about fear of losing everything, financial fear, existential fear. Like it's so deep inside of our bones. Like everything is about survival, and somehow even structures and that we don't like and that feel limiting and that we really want to break out of, but they give us a sense of safety and a sense of, oh, if I hold on to those structures, I'm going to be safe, I'm going to survive. And because of that, they have such a big grip on us, right? Like all of us, like, and to find this place inside of us that knows, even though there's this one part that says, I'm afraid, I just want the safety, I want to survive, which is very, I would say it's a very deeply ingrained, it's not just the child, right? It's more than that. It's literally our survival mechanism. But if we go beyond the survival mechanism, there's this other part. And then your work, it was the phoenix. And the phoenix says, no, I'm fine. Actually, when I really go there, I feel free. That's what you said, and it's like, yes, exactly. On the other side of death, there is not more pain. It's actually freedom. It's more connection. On the other side of heartbreak is not, a broken heart. It's actually an open heart, a loving heart, more love, more connection. And so, but interestingly, when we go with our instincts, they say no to all of that. Like they just want to avoid as much as they can. No, I don't want to go there. Yeah, I don't know, Jess, as an observer, do you have any observation?
It was, just such a beautiful exemplification of this journey, and as you described, both of you, I think, really pulled out what I observed and what I felt in my own body. Like one of the things that's, I think it's like with you when you were talking about Mounira staying on your mat and staying in your body, like, being in group work and developing that capacity to be with one another's journeys in a way where you're holding space for the person in a genuine way, but also able to really, be tracking, the way it's resonating and moving in your system, and what that brings forward and how that can build on, more juice, for the process and the journey for one another. I'm curious, Mounira, we just have a few minutes left. Would you like to bring us out by just sharing whatever would come with listeners, just a little guidance for those who've tuned in on this theme?
Yeah, I think, well, so first of all, I think the guidance is really to find a way to meet those places that are, that are fearful, that are, and to really be with them. And I have to say, like, especially the very deep ones, right? Especially when we're in a death process and it's very challenging. It's very often not something we can just do, just saying, oh, I'm doing this now. And my experience is the deepest places that I've encountered, also the deepest death processes, I needed to be held. I needed to be held, and I needed to be held by someone who has gone there, who has this capacity to hold this whole vastness of what I might be dropping into. And so, of course, there's exercises and all that stuff, but I feel like the deepest stuff, especially when we haven't done a lot of that, is really, I think, somehow in the wisdom that we have as beings, is that ultimately we know we're interconnected and we need each other. And so I feel like our nerve system can relax in a way when someone holds the space for us that we can't access just by ourselves in the same way. Like I think we can do a lot on our own, for sure, but there's certain places we just need this loving space. And the two of you, you've seen many of those moments for me, and I've seen those moments for you. And for me, it was really the love I felt from all of you in the group for me in that moment, the holding that I knew was safe and felt really supportive, and all the love that was ultimately that cracked me open to say, okay, now I'm going a layer deeper. And I think with all the work that I started, that was very like self-centered at the beginning and very much me. I understood ultimately like a big surrender of as strong as I can be in my life and self-sufficient, all that stuff, I need others to truly heal, like on this fundamental level. So it was a big teaching of humility and humbleness, and also the beauty of it, actually, the beauty of needing each other, right? We kind of don't want to need another, but then it's also nice that we're built in a way that we need each other. And I think that's also like, going back to business world, what I ultimately understood, right? It's a world where we think it's all about me and my own journey and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, when we go into this compassion in business and in leadership and psychological safety, we understand this ultimate, we are connected and we are co-creating, and either we're co-creating in a way that is destructive, or we're co-creating in a way that allows us to see each other and support each other. Either way, we're co-creating. We can't not do it, but so the power of it also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's so beautiful. Tanya, I feel like you were going to jump in. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's like I think that's like what you just shared is like a beautiful blessing, is that and such a huge part of the shift, right, is that we do absolutely need each other, and the beauty in that, the absolute beauty in that, and that we are not here to figure it all out on our own, and that it's impossible to do that, and that actually that is a gift. It's the gift of the deepest kind of love running through us.
Yeah, and it just brings forward for me, I think, another thing I hadn't like sort of just consciously like, oh, that's another thing that has been so why I am so committed to group spaces in this deep kind of holding and this deep kind of work together is also that it's a very corrective experience, because so many of us have not experienced being safe or held in the group. I mean, so many of us, in whatever, I mean, I know certainly growing up in the American Western, racist, colonialist, competitive mindset, there was not, rarely was there a sense of safety among others, in that sense of, I mean, even within a team or other, kind of organized things where you would know and feel and think that that kind of safety and holding and care would only benefit, what was happening within the context of the team, the intention, the objectives, because of, again, the overall mindset and the wounds and the conditioning of the culture itself. That's not what was actually happening and playing out there in a large part. There was always that other stuff under the surface that kept that safety from being really fully experienced. Well, thank you, Mounira, so much for being here, for being with us, for guiding Tanya and sharing your wisdom. So grateful, so much respect and admiration and appreciation for you. And for those of you who are listening, if you want to lean in with us and experience some of what we've talked about here in terms of the beauty of this kind of group work, we are having a deeper dive in January on the 20th and the 21st. So you can tune in to get more information about that through our Insta or on our other platforms. And Mounira, would you like to share what you're up to, how people can get in touch with you? To see what you're offering and doing in the world.
Yeah, for sure. So if anyone is interested to bring this work into their businesses or into their team or just their own leadership, there's I have the Connected Business website. It's connected-b.com. And if you want to do a little bit more work for yourself, I'm doing a shadow work group in I think in February, the next one, and I'm doing a 6 months, which is called Leaders of the New Paradigm program. It's 6 months, and it's really for those who say, okay, I want to do this new paradigm leadership, but also not just for people who want to be leaders, but for people who feel like they're inspiring others, making the first steps. Like that doesn't have to be a leadership role. And you can find that on Authentic Self Leadership CO/shadow work or CO/group mentorship. Yes.
And we'll put those links in the episode notes for this too. All right.
It was really amazing to have that conversation with the two of you. So thank you so much for inviting me. And I've said it to both of you. I think these spaces, your podcast and creating a space to lean in, I love that. I think it's so important. It's such a powerful intent. And I'm really grateful for your episodes that you've done already and all the care and love that you both carry. And I've seen that. I've seen how you walk through spaces and how you hold space, and I'm just really grateful for that, and I love you both.
Thank you.
We love you, and we're so grateful you've taken the time to be with us today. I think we could continue the conversation for hours and hours and days and days.
Sure. Thanks so much.
Thank you. We appreciate your presence in this space. If you sense that friends, family, or peers would benefit from leaning in, please share.
If an episode speaks to you in a particularly meaningful way or raises questions that you would like to share with us, we would love to hear from you. You can connect with us here on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram at leaning_in_.
Leaning In is produced by Tanya Mikwitz and Jessica Lesty. The beautiful music you hear here is provided by Masood Ali Khan. Our sound engineer is Marley Mikwitz Montgomery.